Hi, fans. We have a new disc, the Alien, which is outstanding for a one-disc round as long as the holes are 300 feet or less, because you can throw it sidearm, you can throw it backhand, hyzers, and it's a really good putter. I don't think there's anything better for a one-disc round than that. Two names came to mind, and I don't know that either reason is good, but you know, Einstein and Jesus, or the Buddha, that would be cool too. Kind of like to know why everybody thought they were so great, you know. Maybe Nikola Tesla too, there's another one. Although having a conversation with any of those guys might be tough. When I was designing discs, I kind of went up in speed categories and rim width and stuff like that. The Destroyer basically was an extension of the Wraith. So it's a faster Wraith, basically, and that's where it came from. We make them all the time. As a matter of fact, it's just what models are the Blizzard available in, and usually it's fairway drivers and above. Really not any call for mid-range or below in Blizzard. And usually the driver Blizzard ranges are in the 50s. That's the main Blizzard range, but we also make them in the 30s sometimes, 30, 35. Wow, the best disc from each decade. Well, first one was the AVR, and it might still be the best disc of any decade, and the most copied disc by other companies, and us too. All kind of riffs that we make off that original AVR. The Rock was great, and it's still great. The best disc from the 90s. Boy, I don't know, Firebird and Valkyrie were pretty good. T-Bird, that was late 90s. Early 2000s, Wraith maybe. And then after that, Destroyer. More recently, the J is an outstanding mid-range. Different ways, but usually pieces of Frisbees that, you know, I would cut the flight plate out and cut the rims up, and they were Frankenstein things. That's what that's what my friends called them. And I would melt the plastic with a soldering iron, basically, or a soldering gun, and, you know, cut it with a mat knife and weld them all together and throw them and try not to hit anything, because they would fly apart if they hit anything. But we did make the prototype of the AVR on a lathe. I think it was wood, and the actual AVR ended up being a little bit different than the prototype for aerodynamic reasons. That was probably the only prototype that I can think of, other than recently using 3D printing. The Leopard is probably the pride of my fairway drivers, along with and we made it for Millennium. JLS was outstanding. It was the best of its time. I like the Leopard better because it had a little extra technology to it that got put into the FD and later named the Hawkeye. Yeah, the Hawkeye. So I think those are really, really good. We were dabbling with the kart game over the past few years, and I decided it just wasn't worth it. It's not a high volume thing, and there are several companies who are heavily invested in bringing karts to market, and that's what they do. It would just be an ancillary thing that we would do, you know. I really couldn't see any need to do it. The tip of the whip is basically the explosion at the end of the whipping motion that you do with your arm, right? And the tip of the whip is the important part. It's where all the information is, what your disc is doing. That's where you focus. At the tip of the whip, when the disc is being ejected by the end result of all the whipping momentum. It's focused right down to the tip of the whip. That's where the disc goes shooting off of your fingers at whatever orientation, nose up, hyzer, speed, elevation, You know, all of the information is there, and that's where you need to focus in order to control your shots and accelerate your shots, because that's where the acceleration is too. The origin and the history of Echostar plastic. Echostar plastic is just basically recycled high-end plastic, and it's mixed together. It's a mixture of Star and Champion, and you know, different weights and stiffnesses and stuff like that. And it's all the only thing that's the same is the color that we grind. Basically, we grind up bad parts. The material makes this run of discs, and to call it Echostar, yeah, it's an echo of plastic that we've used before. And in order to call it Echo, it has to be at least 50% reprocessed. You know, we call it regrind, but it's actually reprocessed, because very difficult to use regrind. We send it out, they have it pelletized, and it makes it real easy to use compared to straight regrind. The Viper, in its time, was the most popular high-speed driver, and it introduced basically the flex shot. It just became superseded by a lot of other discs, including the Firebird. You know, it was never bad, it just wasn't fast enough or whatever. And yes, we will make more Champion Vipers on occasion, as long as we have people that are interested in buying them. No. People don't want large diameter discs for driving, because that large diameter comes with not only increased weight, but it also comes with more difficulty in throwing them, snapping them, right? A lot more torque resistance. And while torque resistance is nice for off-axis flutter, it's not good for getting a disc to go. When we started making the smaller diameter drivers, that's what everybody wanted, because they were a lot easier to throw. And as long as you could make those smaller diameter drivers torque resistance and have carry, then, you know, there was no need for the larger diameter discs, and they just fell out of favor. As for the 200-gram discs, that's more of the same problem, you know, multiplied. 200 grams is a tough weight to get going in a driver. As for a catch disc, you know, if you're in the wind and you want to play catch or something like that, then yeah, a Zephyr or whatever. And the Condor, yeah, Condor's it's kind of like a rock, you know, but a rock's a lot easier to throw than a Condor. A little more distance than a Tern is a Shrike. A lot of the designs that I do, I build on slower discs and make faster discs, and that was one of those. The Tern was speed 12 or something like that, and the Shrike 13, basically same structure and the same design basically, but the Shrike is a little bit faster. Wow, well, that's easy to answer. For Fairway and up, that would be G-Star, hands down. For down, below Fairway, for mid-range, I don't know, I kind of like Nexus for putters and for mid-range, and if it wasn't that, it would be XT. And I don't like the high-end plastics for putters at all. Mid-range is a mix, but picking one for all of them, I don't really want to do that. Thank you. Oh yeah, there's always something missing. Originally, I made discs from, you know, speed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to speed, what is it, 14 now that we have? You know, the market kind of tells you what they want, what's popular, and you know, we can make a faster disc. So you could say, well, your speed 15 disc is missing. Yes, it is missing, and it's likely to stay missing, because the market kind of says they like speed 12 and maybe speed 13. Not so happy with speed 14. You know, the rims get wider all the time for the speeds, unless it's a lower profile that makes it faster. You know, usually it's the rim width. And a lot of people just don't like rims that are wider than a destroyer. The Speed 15 disc is missing, and like I say, it's probably going to be missing. Other than that, we have gone back through the speed levels and made discs to do stuff in those speed levels better than other discs that we had in those levels. You know, a really good example of that is the Whale compared to the Big Bead. The Big Bead for years and years and years and years is what the pros wanted to putt with. But the Big Bead had, in my opinion, had an issue, and that was excessive low speed overstability. And the Whale actually has better torque resistance than the Big Bead, but it doesn't have less high speed stability. It has less low speed overstability. So in my opinion, it's a better all around driver than the Big Bead, and it's definitely a better all around putter than the Big Bead. And we've done the same thing with a lot of other discs, you know. What disc in this speed category needs whatever. And there's still a lot of stuff to do. And we have a project going on right now. Super Mario Brothers, that's probably my favorite because I played it with my kids. You know, it was really good. There's others that I really liked. The Lara Croft things, you know, I thought those were really good. Tomb Raider, yeah, I like Tomb Raider. But there's another one, Samus or something. It's like a outer space person and has to go through all these mazes and solve these puzzles and stuff like that. That was really good too. I can't remember the name of the game though. I assume that today with the VR stuff, that the immersive quality of these games is even better, but it was pretty immersive, those adventure games, you know. Oh, the Pebble was the first rock we made in like 1985, 86. It was a small diameter rock, stable. I remember playing with it in the Worlds in Canada. You know, it was a really good driver at that point in time. Very controllable and very usable, but wasn't as easy to throw as the larger diameter rock. It had the same purpose, but you know, the larger diameter rock was the San Marino rock in 1988. Basically blew the Pebble out of the water, so we pretty much didn't make them anymore. And the Pebble was very close to the XD. Pebble was the stable version of the XD. It was before there were approved discs. And by the time there were approved discs, we really didn't make it anymore. And it wouldn't be called Pebble, it would be called Rock. Pebble was a nickname. Sorry. Okay, now it comes to me. That was the name we gave the ultralight 175 rock. We called those Pebbles. We didn't call the heavy ones Pebbles. We used it for maximum time aloft. I set a world record with it, you know, throwing at maximum time aloft, but it wasn't that easy to throw. You know, you had to be a pretty good thrower to throw the Pebble for maximum time aloft. Those things were like 105 grams or something. They were very, very light. Yeah, we found a way to improve the texture of Blizzard. And I think there's a lot of people who would love to have long range drivers in Blizzard and weights that they can actually throw. I know that there are a lot of people that would love to have those discs, and we're trying to develop discs that are not only long range, lightweight, but also friendly to throw. That's not a Scoobie.
What is that?
That's a 2-finger pancake shot. That is a Scoobie. Here's another one. This is not a thumber. That's a hook thumber. That is a thumber. It's the other spin. Thumber. Hook thumber. Hook thumber is a lot easier to throw than a thumber. Used to be a very popular throw, the thumber. Fell out of favor, too difficult to do. Hook thumber, 2-finger roller. This is really not nearly as reliable as this, but this you know, you really have to learn how to do it in order to do it. This one's a lot more reliable because you can hold the angles. This is more difficult to do, but you can do it. Brody, it's a 2-finger pancake shot. I think the evolution of disc golf is like ball golf courses, but narrower. I see the same thing I saw when we got into business in 1985. I don't see any difference now. It's still evolving. It was, the original courses were basically Frisbee courses, Frisbee golf courses, short, a lot of trees, you know, a lot of fun throwing through the trees and stuff like that. And we're still evolving out of that. There's a whole bunch of people that think woods golf is disc golf. It is the elite form of disc golf, and no, it's Frisbee golf, and it's fun, it's great stuff, but in my opinion, it's not what a sport should be. There's way too much fluke in the woods golf. The whole time you're scrambling. That's not what I think people want, and of course they want to be able to watch what's going on too. So disc golf is going to evolve like ball golf. Not as wide open as ball golf, of course, but the same sort of thing where a lot of spectators can be on the sidelines watching the action. The pros can throw these big monster drives that the spectators love to see, and they will be required to land them in landing areas in order to get that kind of distance that they need. And if they don't, they can be in a penalized area. It could be in a you know, like a sand trap thing, where if you land in this area, now you have to stand still and throw your next shot. You don't get penalized, but it could be a penalty too. North Coast is getting pretty dang close. That was pretty nice. And I think that's the direction that disc golf needs to go, especially if you want fans there and you want good filming and you want people at home watching it on video to understand what's going on. That's the kind of thing you want. Well, I remember a couple of things. I did some bad things that lost me that tournament. I was being really stubborn with a thumber roller. That's what I wanted to throw on one course, and it wasn't working, and I got frustrated. I just kept throwing it until a disc broke. Even though my buddy Harold, who ended up winning, told me, stop it, throw your backhand. You're the best in the world with a backhand. What are you doing? I was very stubborn. I did that. But so I went way down, and then the last round was at La Mirada. And I made my way back all the way to basically tying for second place with a last 45 foot putt that I made on hole 18. So I remember that. And I remember being stupid in the round before it too. Well, there's two frustrating things about playing with Jerry, which really don't have much to do with Jerry. It's that he points out how suck I am at disc golf. He's a better putter and he's a better driver. I have a better sidearm though, so, you know, and I'm a better roller. But man, he's way more consistent with his drives, and he drives farther than I do. And he putts better than I do too. Not much better at putting, but driving for sure. Lift depends upon the orientation of the disc. Glide is, as we have on our charts, is an inherent thing. It's basically how much glide it has compared to other discs in that speed rank. So let's say this is a speed 4, and it's got a glide of 5, and a disc like over here has a glide of 4, means this one glides more than that one. Lift is different. Lift changes with the attitude of the disc. The more nose up you have, the more lift you have, the more drag you have, and you're going to pitch to the left. So glide and lift are not the same thing. Basically, the only flight numbers that pertain to other discs in other ranks or speed levels is speed. So, you know, if I say it's a speed 4, that means the disc above it are faster through the air. They cut through the air faster, they have less wind resistance. Because this one has a glide of 5, and then this guy up here in another rank has a glide of 5, that's not related to this one. This glide could be completely different than this one. The glide up here has to do with discs that are in this row. Same with the stability. You know, the high speed stability, low speed stability, well, you know, it should be obvious that, you know, a 12-speed disc is thrown a lot faster than a 1 or 2 speed disc generally. You can throw a 1 or 2 speed disc hard as you can, and it's not going to go that fast. The turn numbers for a 1 speed, 2 speed, 3, all the way up to whatever, are not the same as the turn numbers for speed 12 or 11 or whatever it is. And the glide numbers are not the same because the velocity is a lot different. So they don't have anything to do with each other. The rest of the flight numbers only pertain to other discs in that rank, in that speed rank, and that's it. But people keep getting it confused because they think glide is, that's it. This is a 5 glide, this one's got a 6, this one doesn't glide as much as this. It doesn't have anything to do with this one, only these.